Okay guys, so now we are going to learn about constructors within Java objects. So let's just create a new project for this. We'll call it Constructors because that's what we're doing. We'll add the sample code, press create, and we'll get our code base here. So I'm just in IntelliJ here. If you've not installed this already, please go back to the first video of this series to make sure you have all your stuff set up. For context, we are using Java 21. So in the previous videos of this series, we have gone into creating objects, what they're for, and how we essentially are able to transcribe these real-world abstractions and real-world concepts into code, into objects, via object-oriented programming. So let's just create an object here. We'll call it bicycle. If I can spell bicycle correctly. I think that's how you spell it. So we've got our object here. Now, obviously, an object is going to have attributes, right? So let's just say our attributes are going to be gear and speed, right? Because, you know, a bicycle could be on a certain gear at a certain time, and it can be at a certain speed at a certain time, for an example. This is just a simple example. So that's always good. They're both going to be numbers or integers, right? So we've got int gear, int speed. Cool. So this is all well and good. We have our fields, and we can create a new bicycle here with a certain speed, right? So we've got bicycle bike equals new bicycle, like that. If any of this is unfamiliar, just go back to the previous video about objects. Now we can obviously access the bike's values by going bike dot, and then we have gear and speed. That is how we're able to access these fields values. Obviously, currently they will be empty because we've initialized the object. And if we access them here, actually, if we go ahead and print those out, go system out print bike.gear, then we'll get, you know, nothing, right? The default value for whatever integer is, which is 0, which is basically nothing because we haven't, you know, put a gear in there. And the same would apply for obviously the bike.speed, right? So if we print both of those out, they're both nothing, right? So obviously, usually, we would go ahead and go bike.gear equals, and then 10, and then bike.speed equals 100. Then if we run that, obviously, we expect to see 10 and 100. But when we initialize this here, we're initializing an empty instance of a bike. And this is where constructors come in, because we don't necessarily need to do this. We can actually fill up our fields when we initialize it on this same line here. Now, if we go back here, we can create a constructor for a bicycle. So a constructor is kind of what the name suggests. It's almost like a recipe for creating a new instance of this object, which in this case is bicycle. When you create that instance of the class, like we have here, an instance of the bicycle class or the bike object, the constructor sets up the initial state. It sets up the initial state of the object. And it's like, you know, setting the initial ingredients or conditions for a certain dish, right? So let's create a constructor, and I'll show you what I mean and what the use case could be. So to create a constructor, we type public, and then the name of whatever our class is, which must match to this. So we'll say public bicycle, and then 2 brackets. And inside here, we want to include all the different fields that we want to be able to pass in here and initialize. So in here we go int gear, comma, then int speed. These fields need to match exactly with the types here. At the end of this, we'll go space, curly bracket, enter, and then we type this dot speed equals speed, semicolon, and then we go this dot gear equals gear, like that. That's it, that's our constructor. As we can see, it's just one related problem. I'll go into that in a second. Now, this is a keyword, and we can use this, anywhere in a Java object, right? And it's highlighted in this color, which makes it a keyword. It means it's sort of built into the language. Now, this references the instance that we are creating of this object. I've said this a lot of times. And this dot speed, we're basically setting this current object that we're initializing, that we're constructing. We're setting its speed to the speed that was passed in here as a parameter. So these are almost like parameters, like you would see in a function or a method that we call in Java. And if you're not familiar with methods yet, please go back and watch the methods video. I think it's a few videos ago. And it's the same type of concept. We're able to pass in these fields into this sort of function and do something with it, right? So we're setting the current object, the current instance of the bicycle object's speed to the speed that we've passed in here. Now let's see how that reflects in main, because obviously now we see some red because we need to actually provide the gear and the speed. And it needs to be in that order, right? So inside here, we're going to put whatever it is for our speed, so it'll be 100. Oh no, sorry, no, not speed, gear. So our gear is going to be gear 1. And our speed is going to be 100. And you can see the IDE has annotated that here. So the first one is gear, the second one is speed, right? So now we've actually filled up, we've constructed an instance of a bike that has the gear of 1 and the speed of 100. And then we're printing out both those fields here. Let's run this and have a look. Cool, so we get 1 and 100. That's what we wanted. Let's try 200 and gear 7. Okay, now we get 7 and 200. Sick. So now we're able to create an object and fill up the values within this constructor here. Now, we can have as many of these constructors as we would like, but we can't have duplicate constructors. So for example, if I copy that and paste it below, you can see that there's an error because we have a repeat of the same constructor. So what we can do is we can change these, right? We can have one constructor that just takes in the gear. And if we want that, we need to get rid of this speed here. And now we have another constructor that allows us to create a bicycle just given the gear. And obviously we can modify this object afterwards, right? No matter what constructor we use, whether it's empty, whether it has fields in, whether it has some fields in and others not, we can go bike dot, we can go bike dot and then whatever we want to set, and we can reset it, right? That's the same as it was before. But this is just about initializing the new version of the object in line with its fields. So we can create one that just initializes the gear, right? So we can have a constructor just for the gear. So we can basically, in theory, get rid of this speed here, and this will still be valid code. So let's run that and see what happens. So we've initialized it with a gear of 7, but there is no speed yet because we haven't specified, and we're using the constructor for a gear. And as you can see, we've got 7 and 0, which is all expected because there is no speed yet. We haven't filled in this value for speed. And we can also create empty constructors as well. So a lot of times we want an empty constructor to just be able to fill in the values later, rather than create them all when we initialize the object. So this is what an empty constructor would look like. It's just a constructor with no parameters and nothing in the body. We can actually put this all onto one line because there's actually nothing in here. Now, we could get rid of this gear and this would still be valid because we have an empty constructor here. All of our fields are initialized as empty. If we run that, we expect to see 0 and 0 because we haven't put anything in. Now, the one thing is if we don't have any constructors at all, let's say we just delete all of these, an empty constructor is available automatically. So if we wanted an object with only empty constructor, we don't want to have any constructors, then by default, Java 21 will allow us to use this syntax here and specify an empty bicycle without having to create that empty constructor here. Now, the second we start creating any other constructors, for example, if we delete this empty constructor, we can see there's an error and we can't run it because there needs to be an empty constructor. If we have other constructors of other lengths that include other things here. So that's the one thing to bear in mind. Hopefully that has explained constructors in Java. If you guys have any questions or any comments, please do leave them down below. I love to read them. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.